So my first task was to tell you what got me into fire and fuels. And I think probably the best way to say it is by accident. And so I got my undergrad in biology. My other degrees are just in wildlife management or wildlife ecology and management. And so when I started my second academic job after getting my PhD, I was asked right away to lead this conference on pulling together all the experts on pine barrens to get the kind of state of knowledge on pine barrens and what were some of the limitations. Pine barrens are like globally imperiled ecosystems, and so it was a great way to start out. Basically that conference gave me this into fire. I became the faculty advisor to the fire crew at Northern College. And then I decided I was tired of being just the faculty advisor, so I wanted to become a student. And so I took my Basic 32. And I was also at a time where I was doing this monitoring and research work, trying to understand how plants were responding to the prescribed fire regime, that I realized that all the other stuff unrelated to fire wasn't as important to me anymore. So, and then, yeah. Oops. There we go. Okay. So this is kind of the start of my academic journey. So Danny, a lot like you, I ended up going into academia because I really enjoyed the research. I really enjoyed being a teaching assistant when I was a grad student, and so I thought this would be my career, the sole thing I would do in life. So you can see on the one side, I started out as doing with students. We were doing ecology of small mammals. Worked with the Wisconsin DNR to create a wolf monitoring program, and involved a lot of capture and citizen science. And then all of a sudden, I got that bug. I started developing a monitoring program to find out whether prescribed fire was meeting the objectives that the Forest Service had set on this actually very district that I am now the district ranger on. So I've literally come full cycle here. And so in doing that, trying to develop this monitoring program and basically coming up with the whole sampling scheme, I realized that fire was super interesting. Like, it caused different patterns in vegetation communities in different places. You know, aspect and slope and all those things were super important. And I got more and more interested in fire. And so I asked the folks, I said, hey, so can I observe you? Can I watch you guys burn so that I can better understand how fire behaves on the landscape, to better understand how the vegetation is responding? And they're like, oh no, you can't, you have to have training and all that. I was like, you know, and at this point I've had an undergrad degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. It's like, what could I possibly need to know to do this? And so they told me I had to take my Basic 32, and I did. And then once I took my Basic 32, I could be out there with them. Somebody at some point handed me a drip torch, and you guys probably know the story. It's like, once you had that drip torch in your hand, it's like, I found my career. So anyway, so that's really how I got specifically interested in fire. I'm going to move one slide further here. And then, so this is my full path. Heather, I have a couple more boxes than you, but I'm a little bit older. But so anyway, I show you here that I hosted that conference, started getting interested in fire specifically as a disturbance agent in ecology. And then friends told me about this job in Yosemite. And I knew enough about the literature in fire ecology that Harold Biswell was, you know, basically the professor, the Berkeley professor that really brought fire back to fire management in the Forest Service and the Park Service. And so anyway, so being that Harold was from California, Yosemite is, you know, one of the birthplaces of fire, that and Sequoia Kings Canyon. I thought this job was like exactly what I needed in life. And it was the first federal job that I ever applied for. And you guys know who have had federal jobs, the whole USA Jobs thing is such a puzzle to figure out. And my whole life was on the line with this job. And anyway, I got the job. And I worked in Yosemite for 6 years. And it taught me so much about fire that I feel super fortunate to have been able to be there during, one of the worst droughts in, probably the last millennia. And then the response of the vegetation to that drought. And now what we're seeing is the response of the fires to the drought-stressed vegetation communities. I took a short stint, super important for my career, I think, and super important for my learning in Washington, D.C., working for the Office of Wildland Fire. Office of Wildland Fire is the group that coordinates all the DOI, Department of Interior fire organizations, whereas, the Forest Service just manages its own. DOI is far smaller, probably a fifth the size of the Forest Service, but certainly very important. And so I worked in DC next to people making decisions for basically everybody out west. I did a short stint as in federal government. You're allowed to do these details, and they can be for as much as 120 days. And so I did another one on the Sierra National Forest as a line officer. And so I learned what it was like to be in the seat for the person who takes all the responsibility and who's accountable for all the good that fire does and all the destruction that it also can cause. And then I really liked that job. It was, there's definitely challenges because you're supervising all different kinds of specialists, from wildlife biologists to timber folks to silviculturalists, hydrologists, soil scientists. But it's a great place to learn. And you'll see that that's kind of one of my themes here. And so I took a job as the district ranger on the Superior National Forest up in Ely, Minnesota, and had the opportunity to work on actually one of the most visited wilderness areas in North America is the Boundary Waters. And so part of my district, actually half of the district, was in the Boundary Waters and has a very active fire management program and prescribed fire program. And with my background in fire and as the now new line officer in Ely, was able to allow those guys to understand that I was not going to hold them back on burning. And so we pursued all different avenues to reduce fuels that became super important 2 years ago in the Greenwood fire. The other thing that I learned on the Superior, so as a line officer, you're the person that's in charge, you're the person that takes all responsibility. And so my second year there, 2016, in July, we're burning this 89-acre Foss Lake fire that turns into the Foss Lake wildfire. And the FLA, what is FLA? This learning, a facilitated learning analysis is, you can find it on the Lessons Learned website. But anyway, super interesting to be the person in charge when you lose a prescribed fire. I was in Yosemite when we lost the 2009 Big Meadow fire. And, but a very different seat to be the one who, everybody in the press and the legislators are asking you questions, what did you get wrong? And people actually looking for who was responsible for lighting the match in just super negative way. And so another one of my themes is that I'm the opposite of drama. And so I was unwilling to let that stuff distract all the firefighters from, for one, getting the fire wrapped up and making everybody realize that nobody was going to lose their job. I shouldn't say nobody's ever lost their job because of a escape prescribed fire. They actually did back in the day. But now you're very safe from those sorts of things. And then I took a bunch of friends of mine told me about this job in Grand Teton National Park. Chief of Science and Resource Management. It seemed like this amazing opportunity in one of the most incredible ecosystems in the country, where fire is also important, and a pretty well-established fire program, established fire ecologist and fire effects crew. So I took that job, and it's like some jobs are, it didn't turn out to be the job of a lifetime. And so after just 2.5 years, I came back to the Midwest, and I'm now on the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest. I'm the district ranger here again, so I've kind of gone back to what I was in Minnesota. But this is the ranger district where I did all my monitoring and research, and the crew at the other end of my hall here are still collecting that data. They're still using our plots and sampling scheme, and this is a super active fire program, and I'm excited to be back here and now being able to, energize those folks to keep it all going. What do I enjoy? I think all of you said what I like about fire. I like the data part. I like taking messy databases, and if you work with federal land managers, every single unit has its own little group of spreadsheets or back of the bar napkins with all the fuel moistures on it. And so taking all that data and turning it into something that can be usable, either at the unit scale or even at the national scale, I find that stuff fun. I think of fire, I think fire is very logical. Fire behaves to physical principles and doesn't break those rules. It's up to us to figure out what the fire is, what is the fire figuring out, but or how do we figure out what the fire knows that we're slow to pick up on. And though I say that because if you're around fire enough, you see that fire always finds available fuels. It shows you where the wind has dried out the fuels that are exposed and left the others more moist where they're not exposed. They show you where the sun was shining on the grasses in the morning and dried up the dew. It's just, I think, the world of fire. It's just such an incredible force, and understanding that is, I think, a lifetime of learning. So if you're prepared to listen, and if you're prepared to learn, fire is, I think, one of the most incredible teachers. And I love being outside. The picture on the, I guess that would be on the, I don't know, on the right for you, me coring the lodgepole. I think, Heather, that's the crew that you came and visited us on in Yosemite 12 or 15 years ago. So that was an awesome trip. And then pretty cool to put 2 diameter tapes around a sequoia tree. Oops, okay, so what are the challenges? This is a really tough question. I mean, I think it's tough and it's emotional. The challenges are super numerous in fire. And I think what you guys are going to see is going to be really different than what I have seen in my career. Even though we know a ton about fire today, there's still so much uncertainty that it makes a lot of us very nervous. Remember that fire behavior is, and fire behavior modeling is based on the weather and on forecasts. And you know how forecasts sometimes work. I think the decisions that we make in fire, even you on the fire line, some of those decisions are about your colleagues' lives. But you're balancing that between some resource damage that could happen, or people could lose their homes. So the weight of those decisions in fire are like nothing I have ever experienced before I got into fire. You're seeing unprecedented fire behavior. When I was talking about like droughty vegetation and then how fire responds to that, I think there's still a lot to be learned about how fire is responding to climate change. You have an uninformed public with super high expectations. We don't get out there and fight tornadoes, right? But I think the public thinks that we can get out there and fight wildfire and be, 100% successful all the time. There's politics. And the politics are driven by uninformed politicians who think, like in this picture, that spending more money on, say, a 747 air tanker when firefighters are still carrying shovels in their hands. And then to that, I'd also say that there's too much money in fire now, so that all the solutions that we can think of, we only think of solutions that cost money and kind of fuel that the economics of fire. So I know that's negative, but we'll just kind of move on to how you can be successful in fire and how it's helped me. I would say the most important things for your success in fire and fuels, and those of you that have worked on the fire line know this, it's like you got to know enough to keep yourself and your peers or your crew and the people around you safe. It's a high risk environment and the risks change a lot. I'd say things that help me the most are my ability to understand fire behavior and understanding fire ecology. And those that I learned in Yosemite apply for me here as a line officer in Washburn, because I'm able to sort of temper my concern about the fire or prescribe fire, because I know what's predicted, or I know what's likely to happen given the fuel and the fuels and the weather and the forecast. Trying to think what else. Skills, definitely, you got to be a listener. You got to be able to think critically. You've got to be able to respond quickly to changing information. And I'd say you've got to be a good risk manager, or decision maker using risk management, and understanding that those risks change, sometimes on a minute by minute basis. I would personally say it's good to have a super healthy set of skills and, backcountry living, camping, so that you can always be comfortable on fire assignments. I would, I probably shouldn't tell you, but I would pack in my line gear. I'm a fly fisherman, and I have this fly rod that packs down in 4 pieces to about this big, and I can put it in my line gear. And let me tell you, there were times when that thing was just like the best break from what was going on, because you guys know how much you sit around on fire in some years. I'd also say keep yourself physically fit and mentally fit, because fire is a tough environment. It's you can be on fires where it's just super monotonous and you're leaning against a bus for what seems like 8 days in a row, and then all of a sudden now we're on a helicopter and now we're cutting line. So just having a good head is important. Attitudes. I think the last one that I put down there is really important. Take responsibility. What I feel like I've seen is less and less, fewer and fewer people take responsibility for stuff that they mess up. And I think that when you see leaders that are willing to take responsibility, it makes the group feel better. Like we know that we already knew that somebody messed up, but when somebody says, I screwed that up, everybody it sort of de-escalates everything. And on the Foss Lake fire, when I had to go to the public in the community college auditorium, the first thing I said, I'm the one who signed the burn plan. If you have problems with this, I'm the one you need to talk to. And it's true. And once I said that, literally everybody quieted down. Nobody really pointed their fingers at us. They asked questions. They had concerns, but it totally changed the sound in the room. And so I think that's one of the most important things that we can do. Maybe not at your beginning levels, but definitely as you take on more and more responsibility, remember people like to hear that we're all human and we can make mistakes. I also think I've always been a leader that leads with kindness and with inclusion. I try to include everybody that I can. And I think that's really important to any organization that you're working in. There's some tough leaders out there in fire that do not lead with kindness. And I think that makes it hard on everyone. And then what are things that I learned from fire that have served me in life? This was a little harder for me, Heather. But I think, one, I told you before, it's like when you're in the, when you're on a fire, and especially when you're in like just a member of the crew, firefighter 2, or you're a squad boss, not if you have a single resource responsibility. There you have much more kind of autonomy. But if you're on a crew, you got to learn to be patient and just take what comes, because you're kind of at the bottom of the pack. And that first thing that I put on skills, I think that is super, super important. And it's something that I've come to really appreciate, that, the further up in organizations that you move, the further you get further and further away from actually doing something or accomplishing something. And always in fire, I accomplished something. Whether I just humped the hose up to the top of the, to the front of the hose lay, and then walk back to get another, and that, like, that's all I'm doing today. There's beauty in that, because like, if I told you what I was doing today, you'd be totally bored. So anyway, so that, I think that's great. I say creating a escape route and a safety zone, something that I learned on fire that I use in life. I mean that metaphorically. Like, think about it. If you're in an unsafe place, either emotionally or physically, have an escape route and a safety zone, know where it is at all times and how to get there. I think that's a really great metaphor in life. Other things up there. And then, the stuff on about fire that I learned is very important to me, and I kind of hold that in my daily life, but it's not something that I, pull out and share with folks. Oops. And then here's the end for me. I changed up your slide, Heather, because I have had so many careers. Many of Heather's colleagues have seen me in different colored shirts for all the different jobs that I've had. And I've really appreciated the ability to move around the federal government and land management and do different things. But for thinking about you guys starting out in your careers, I think, kind of knowing who you are is really important. I say, think realistically about what you can do, meaning know that you probably shouldn't apply for my job, but definitely be willing to do some reaching, right? Accept some jobs or go after some jobs that are a little bit higher up than you thought you would. For me, that job in DC, it was definitely a stretch. I didn't even own a suit, but it was such a great experience for me to see how people operate in DC and to see how they, just the way they operate and the way they create policy and how that just moves down the line. That was a great stretch. And I think all the rest of my successes, that short detail in Washington, DC was part of that. And then the warning that I give you about social media, what you do today can come back to haunt you next year or the year after. So just be super careful about your social media accounts. When you get into federal land management, we will tell you, if you're taking pictures on the job, those are mine. Like, those are the Forest Service's pictures. And if you post stuff that you shouldn't be posting, you'll get in trouble. So be careful there. And then on the how to be successful in life, I definitely think the being respectful, being positive, doesn't mean you have to be happy, or that kind of thing, but being positive or being solution focused, I think is important to leaders, because there's times when we all know the negative side. I shared some of that today, but be positive. Never burn a bridge, because look, I'm back where I started. And if I had done something stupid back here, I never would have gotten back here. So definitely good, good way to think. And then just to end, I'd say there's a ton of stuff that you can do in fire. Literally, you do not have to be a ground pounder. You can be a business, you can be a finance person, you can be a check-in, check-out person, you can manage the logistics of the whole operation. You can work in the food unit. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff to do in fire. And a lot of the jobs in the federal service, you don't even have to be a primary firefighter. So when I was the fire ecologist in Yosemite, I wasn't a primary firefighter. That was secondary to my duties. So the expectation was I helped out on all the fires, but it wasn't like I dropped my day job and then that's what I did. And then the other thing I'd say is the working in federal land management, like the Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they all have strong, good land management missions. And so the work that you do is hard, it's challenging. We're often challenged by the public. And so you're going to need something that keeps you going. And that having a great mission, at least for me, wakes me up every day. And when I go to work, I'm super excited to serve the people because what we do in the Forest Service is worth it to me. So I'd say find a federal land management career and you'll find purpose in life. That's all I got.
That was wonderful, Gus. I'm really enjoying. This pattern was kind of a last minute idea to make this pattern of slides, but I'm really liking how it's turning out, just to see the different ideas that people are presenting. And I find that I'm riveted as it's a story that I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, what's the next piece? So I really appreciate you sharing a bit of yourself with us.